So I had a very interesting patient today. I first saw him about a month ago. His name is Kenneth. And this patient is 35 years old, and he's been suffering from seizures for about 20 years. He's had seizures, grand mal seizures, petit mal seizures, all these kind of seizures. He was married at one time when he was in his 20s. Then he started having these seizures, and it affected his brain, and he became, less responsive, and he just kept having these seizures, shaking, and he couldn't sleep at night. And he got to the point where he couldn't even take care of himself. He needed help to get dressed, to eat. And he lives with his father, who's a 65-year-old carpenter who works every day. But his father has to take care of him, has to dress him, has to feed him, has to change his clothes. And he has these seizures during the day, and he has to treat him for these seizures so he won't swallow his tongue, and so he'll breathe, and he stops breathing and everything. And during the night, he wakes up every hour or two and keeps his father awake. And so a tragic thing happened just before I saw him in December, and that was his mother died. And a couple days later, his grandmother died. And this really affected him, and he was crying. The Kenneth, the patient, was crying all the time, and even getting worse. And so when he came to see me, I talked to him a little bit. I said, I understand you lost your mother. And he went into a horrible seizure. He turned bright red. And his father went over and hugged him and said, you'll be all right, breathe, breathe, breathe. And it took him about 5 minutes. He was hovering, breathe, breathe, you're going to be okay, breathe. And I said, is that one of the seizures? Yeah, he has a seizure. Talking about his mom gave him another seizure. And so I said, my goodness, I knew in my mind this is not an epileptic seizure. This was a pseudoseizure. He may have some problem with his brain. He may be mentally retarded or something, but this was not a typical seizure. And so I got to talking to the father, and I said, what is it that bothers you the most? He said, the problem is at night, he keeps waking up, screaming at night, and having seizures at night. And so I have to wake up and go into his bedroom and make sure he doesn't swallow his tongue and help him, every hour or two, so I don't get a good night's sleep. And then the next day I have to get him dressed and take him to work with me, and he just sits in the car all day. And he said it would sure help if he could have something to help him sleep. So I said, you know what, let me try some of the lorazepam, some Ativan, 1 milligram, just a medium dose of that, and just see how it works for him. Because he was on Dilantin and all kinds of seizure medicine that cost him a lot of money, and it was making him feel bad. I said, just stop all that stuff. Stop Dilantin, stop all your Nebutol, all the other, and just take this lorazepam. So that was before Christmas. So he came in today, and the 35-year-old Kenneth came in. He was bright. He held out his hand to shake my hand. How are you feeling? He says, I feel good. And his father hugged me, and he said, you know what? That medicine is a miracle. He has not had one seizure since then. He sleeps all through the night. And more importantly, when I take him to work, he comes and helps me. He uses the nail gun. He's with me all day helping me build the houses. He said he's a new man. He said we spent all that money and years trying to get him treated for seizures, and you knew how to treat him without any tests. Just gave him the right medicine, took him off the wrong medicine. He's a new man. So I thought that was a miracle, and I was very thankful for that. So the father was real happy, and the patient was. He looked much brighter. I said, how do you feel? Is there anything to do for you? He says, I feel good now. I feel good. And his father said when he wakes up in the morning, he's very alert. He's not all drugged out like he used to be, because that Ativan wears off after 4 hours, and they wake up feeling really good. So I said, well, let's put you on another month. Come back next month, and let's see if you're still doing well on it. So we'll see how it is. So, over the years in the emergency room, I've seen pseudoseizures. I know what they look like. And I think, in all due respect to the doctors who are treating him in Houston, they just got word of his seizures from his father, a description. They didn't actually watch the seizure, but when you watched it, you could tell it wasn't a true epileptic seizure. It was what we call a pseudoseizure, which is a false seizure. It's not a true epilepsy. And so he does things like shake, and people that have pseudoseizures it just looks different. And they can come out of them all of a sudden. There's certain ways you can test for it. But after you've seen a few, you can recognize what a pseudoseizure is as opposed to a real seizure.